I had that. Welcome on into our regular season edition of Inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller with Jeff Nowak, just gearing up for a Sunday noon kickoff, just days away from playing the Carolina Kitty Cats, week 1 of the regular season. And we're home in the Dome to start out week 1, and hopefully we have a better showing than the LSU Kitty Cats did in week 1.
Wow. Yeah, that was a tough game. And one of the reasons I hate college football is because I watch 4 hours of football only to have it end like that. Not into it. Not into it. I had someone tell me, it's like, oh, the NFL should review plays like college. Fuck no. Get me out of, like, less reviews. Guys, more reviews is not the answer to any of your problems.
Hey, let's happily go to another commercial break.
Get rid of the reviews. Get rid of the second commercial break after a kickoff, and we'll be on the right track. The 5-minute commercial break followed by a kickoff, followed by another 5-minute commercial break makes me want to watch something else. There were points last night that I ended up missing the game because I changed it to tennis in between kickoff first. Anyway, you got me going. I hate it. But no, it's NFL week, and what college football reminds me is that the NFL is a much more watchable product than college. The timing of it works better. The length of games is more reasonable. The action, the offense just typically looks better. There's better execution. The kickers can make it from nearly everywhere. Anyway, that's
the only thing that college has over NFL for me is the atmosphere, obviously.
Yeah, the fan experience and like the gigantic stadiums that are always just nuts. That's definitely true. Like the craziest environment I've ever been in was 2019 in Tuscaloosa, and they all start swinging those towels and singing Dixieland Delight, and they're fuck Auburn. Like that's the peak. I know I've cursed twice in the first 5 minutes of this podcast, but I couldn't not curse about Dixieland Delight. Anyway. We don't have to sing neck. But Saints-Panthers coming up on Sunday. So this is going to be still a 2-pod week for us. Next week, we'll start into our 3-pod week, but one of us is obviously reacting to the game. There's no game to react to this week, so we're not going to have that pod this week. But the upcoming pod, we're going to do kind of a preview. We're going to try to get someone from the Panthers side to get us ready for what to expect from the fighting Bryce Youngs and all of them. But this episode, we're going to give you a rundown of this first segment, some news, not a ton of news to hit, but a good bit of stuff that's happened since last Friday that we can mention. Was out at practice today. There was one key player who got back, which is nice to see. One key player who disappeared, which is not nice to see. And a head coach who was entirely unhelpful, which is unsurprising to say the least. But from there, we're going to talk about X factors. In the second segment, I want to talk about, okay, what are the X factors of this season? What are kind of the success points or pitfalls that if it goes a certain way, I could see this team being a playoff team, making a run. If it goes the other direction, it's going to torpedo their chances. So I have a few things noted. We're going to go through them. Final segment, I want to talk about, can the narrative around this team change, this Saints team, in terms of what would they have to do to get the fan base on board? Right. What would have to happen? Because I think that it's it's a little more than just making the playoffs. Like, I think that's, if you don't make the playoffs, that's probably what ends the run at all. But what would you have to do to actually get people excited? Is I think that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But okay, let's get into the rundown. And this is a funny one because I actually had to, after we recorded our podcast at the end of last week, I had to come back and record like an extra 30-second like stinger to like throw into it, because an hour after we recorded, DA came out and was like, well, we waived Kene Nwangwu, the guy that was named, because he's I don't know, broken in some form or fashion. He failed his physical. So it's funny because right after you asked the question, why, I wonder why Minnesota cut him, is when I cut in that little bite. Because I think we now know why Minnesota probably cut him. He was not healthy.
I guess if he was not passing the physical, would they have to cut him with the injury designation? I guess not, though.
Yeah, failed physical designation, which means you just threw him back onto waivers. Didn't really change anything.
No, I mean, like when Minnesota released him, they didn't have to do anything like that?
No, because he was just a straight cut. You would only have to give him an injury designation if you intended to put him on IR. Okay. And they clearly weren't planning to do that. Like, you can just cut a guy. There's some mechanics of it that all work out, but whether it was the reason they cut him or whether, he was playing to a lower standard than they wanted because he was hurt or whatever, either way, he's not going to be on the Saints. And that's a bummer because I was kind of excited about the Shaheed Nwangwu duo, at least for everything but trying to pronounce that second name. And now you're going to back to square one. They did work out Jacour Peterson, who's a kind of a UFL, XFL standout. I always lose track of which league these guys are in. And I kind of see that as like, okay, they're looking at another guy who could be a potential return ace. That's more so than just a receiver, a core four guy, if you will. We all know what that means. But he has not been signed as of yet. They are at 53. So if you wanted to sign somebody else, they would have to cut somebody. That's because John Ridgeway they added by trade. So there is no roster spot to actually be had. They would have to cut somebody, but that's really the only news per se of the last couple of days.
Wait a minute. What about Alvin Kamara putting his house up for sale?
Oh yeah. How could I forget about that? Everyone who's trolling Zillow, like who's like got the the metal detector on the ground, like trolling around Zillow to try to, and it also, his name was Alvin Kamara on the site. So I guess that's.
Oh, I didn't know that. I wonder, maybe he put it in his dad's name or something. Who knows?
Maybe. I don't know. Either way, yeah. Alvin's house is for sale. It's a doozy. It's a big boy house.
We could probably rent it.
Yeah, I have considered. I'm going to go down to the bank and see if maybe I could swing that. Like, what was it? $1.5 million dollar mortgage. You think they'd laugh me out of the room?
That'd be a nice spot though to have some Super Bowl parties for sure.
It sure would. It sure would. Now I wouldn't overreact to that. It's kind of silly. Like there's a lot of reasons people sell houses. I think you had mentioned like he's also selling his Atlanta house. Is that right? Is that what you said?
It's not just the New Orleans property up for sale.
Yeah, so I mean maybe
he's getting liquidated.
I mean, this is a time if I kind of feel like when you have multiple properties and you feel like the housing market is going to collapse into eternity, this is when you would sell your house. But that's not the purpose of this podcast. Either way, I don't think this is a scenario where, I know he joked with Nick Underhill in the locker room today that he's going to go live with Matt Bowers because Matt has plenty of room and he wants to save money. But I wouldn't take that as any indicator that, things are going well or like the contract conversation has kind of hit a dead end, which maybe it has, but I don't think that's why you would suddenly decide to sell your house. So I think that's where we are.
I did get breaking news from my in-house reporter, my wife. She let me know that he scrubbed his Instagram account also of all Stains things. I know it's a big deal.
He does that like once a year.
Yeah, right. And doesn't have anything mentioned of the Saints. All he does mention though is NASCAR right now on his Instagram.
And I mean, I don't know, maybe things aren't going well, and but like the fact is, this is not like something that I would overly be concerned about. I'm more concerned about whether he can actually get it done on the field right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Once we see that, then I'll be like, all right, let's.
In those X Factor segment, I'll definitely be. I mean, Kamara's got to be in there.
Yeah, but it's not really about Kamara. It's more so about like, can you block for him? For me personally, like,
for sure.
It's like, okay, can you get a running game? Period. Is the X factor. But all right, moving forward. One guy who returned to practice today, first time in a long time, Nick Saldiveri. He's been dealing with a calf injury. He was out there. We don't get to watch full practices anymore. We only get to watch like 30 minutes. So he was involved in individual drills. I don't know if he took part in any kind of team drills. It's going to be tough to know if and when he takes over for the first team. I am curious to see how that does play out because he was kind of the pick early on. Like they had kind of given him that job and said, here, go earn it or go, take this and see what you can do. And then he got hurt. You went to Lucas Patrick. I always kind of felt like there was going to be this magnetism toward Lucas Patrick just in terms of having a veteran in there. But I do think this puts a little bit more pressure on Lucas, even in just week one, if you go out there and struggle and there is someone who you feel like knows the offense and can take over, I wouldn't be shocked if by like weeks 2 or 3, you have turned to Nick Saldiveri. So it's good to see him back out there. There was some question, might he land on IR? Might he do this? They didn't do that, and that's because they were hopeful to get him back toward the start of the regular season. And clearly, you're in a good situation that, I don't know if he'll be active this week. I don't know if he'll be ready to go this week, but he's clearly pretty close.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wouldn't imagine that he'd be ready to roll week 1. Definitely not starting. I don't even know if he can come in rotation with all the time he's missed. It just, I guess, depends on how you can ramp him up, I get, this week at practice. But, man, that's definitely key because you thought he was going to be obviously a big part of at least the rotation for the offensive line. And I don't know, just too many guys that I feel like you were kind of counting on going into the season to make that next step to be, that those youth building blocks haven't been around.
Yeah, and I feel like he had some athleticism in that group that Lucas doesn't. Like, I think Lucas is solid, but there are times where he just gets blown by, and I'm like, he's just slow-footed. Like it's right. Just, he's a backup in the NFL for a reason. So we'll see. And I thought Nick was playing pretty well when he got hurt. It's tough to know because we haven't seen him on the field. We haven't really seen him in a preseason game. He hasn't really had to go up against anyone who was truly trying to beat him. Most of the padded practices we got in were after Nick went out. So you kind of take that with a grain of salt. But I would be surprised if Nick does not end up starting at left guard by the end of the season, whether that's because of injury, whether that's because of poor play. Yeah, I think you're going to see that. One other attendance note. So we also didn't have DeMarco Jackson, Jalen Ford, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Marshawn Lattimore, Mason Tipton were all participating in practice. So that's good to see. It looks like they're getting ready to come back. One guy who was not there was Willie Gay. It is an injury issue, but that's all we know because Dennis Allen told us this.
Well, here's what I'll say. I'll say that we'll put out an injury report on Wednesday. So until Wednesday, I won't make any comments.
Injury or non-injury then?
It's injury related, and you guys will get a report on Wednesday.
It's full week 1 mode.
Full week 1 mode.
So yeah, super helpful. First injury report comes out on Wednesday, and that's what we're gonna get, and we're gonna find out what exactly Willie is dealing with. Hopefully, it's nothing major, nothing significant, but that has been a theme over the last few days, and it's partially why like the backup quarterback conversation I think is funny because DA has made it pretty clear that if there is something that he can keep secret, he's going to keep it a secret. And I don't know if it's just this year or maybe it's a little more pronounced than before, but like he wouldn't even tell us whether Clint Kubiak was going to be up in the booth or on the sideline. Like somehow that's
like, come on now. I mean, it just now I guess coach is being petty with us, like the fans are petty with everybody else.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't know. I guess if he did kind of have some interesting comments in the vein of like we're paying attention to everything, and we're listening to what these coaches are saying and their players, and trying to get any hint of an advantage from what they're revealing to the media. So I kind of take it as like, well, we're doing this, so we feel like if we're doing this, they must be doing this too. So we're gonna make them wonder about every possible thing. And that includes the starting safety. That includes what injury Willie Gay might be dealing with right now. That includes where Clint Kubiak's going to be hanging out on game days. It also includes the backup quarterback. And it sounds like they've decided, or at least like if you read between the lines, I feel like they do know who they're going to declare. I don't think they're still looking at Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener and saying, we don't know who the backup quarterback is going to be this Sunday. But they are still talking about it as a competition. And again, I think that's not so much a competition to be the backup quarterback. It is a competition of like, hey, we're developing both of these guys, and how can we maximize that for both players throughout the course of the season? And this is a little bit about what DA said on that vein today.
Yeah, I think that's going to be something that we're going to continue to evaluate as the season goes on. Obviously, somebody's going to be the number 2 come game day. I think that declaration has to be made on Sunday, so that's probably when we'll make that declaration. And I think both of Jake and Spencer both need to practice. I think they both need to try to develop. The reality is when you get into practice, whoever the backup quarterback is, and I don't care whether it's a young player or a veteran player, in all the years that I've been in the league, that player gets very, very few, if any, first-team reps in practice. Unless there's extenuating circumstances, as you know, like there was last year where Derek was a little bit limited on some days. And I don't anticipate that being a whole lot different. And so whether it be what few reps they might get with the ones, whether it be on the show team, some extra work after practice, some extra work in the film room, those are all the things that we're going to have to do to try to, work to develop both of these young quarterbacks, because we like both of them and we think both of them have a future.
So yeah, and I mean, you're kind of in the same scenario that you were last week. You're getting the same answer. It's going to come down to who do you feel like the most comfortable throwing into a negative game situation that you have not prepared for, and B, how do you split up all these reps throughout the week? And like DA said, there's not that many of them to split up, like at least not first team reps. I feel like there's this idea that, okay, the starting quarterback goes out there and gets 10 first team reps, then the second string quarterback goes out there and gets 6 first team reps, and then the third string quarterback goes out there and gets however many. That's really not how it works. It's more like 12 and 2. Like it's like you're not really getting first team reps for those guys at all. Now, if there's a scenario like you had going into week 4 of last year where Derek's hurt and misses practice on Wednesday or doesn't throw on Wednesday because he's dealing with something, then you look at it and say, okay, how do we split up these reps between the QB2 and the QB3? And I imagine whoever you were looking at and saying this guy's probably going to start, then you would get them the lion's share, and the third guy would kind of get shunted to the side. But I just don't see it as being a developmental issue right now if this guy was named QB2, suddenly that would help his development. I don't think that's really what you're looking at. And it's like teams don't make decisions thinking, well, what if we can Wally Pip him down the line? Like, that's what, like, if you're arguing that Spencer should be in that spot so that maybe he'll steal the backup, maybe he'll steal the starting job by getting an opportunity to go in. Like, I get why you're saying that. I get why you think that would be beneficial for what you want to happen anyway. But I need you to understand that's not how the team is going to look at this. They're not going to be like, oh, well, maybe if we put Spencer here, he might sneak this job away, and we'll talk. That's just not how it works.
Just that negativity around Carr is relentless.
I guess it's just like we're going to talk about the backup quarterback, and I'm going to talk about the backup quarterback, and I'm going to talk about what the backup quarterback's job is. Someone told me I was missing the forest for the trees, and it was just funny because it's like literally you're missing, like you're saying something about me that is applicable to you, which the forest in this situation is what the backup quarterback job is actually meant to do, like what their role is, and the trees are these weird ideas that the team should be thinking about, like, let's get data on the backup quarterback. That's just not it. That's not what you're doing. That's why most teams go with veteran backup quarterbacks, because that's not what it's about. Anyway, I don't know why I just got sucked into the conversation all over again, but and this is what I wanted to mention. So the reason I brought this up, even though it went on a lot longer than I intended, was so practice today I thought was interesting because I do think at this time typically, and we're not seeing team reps, right? We're seeing drills, but I felt like the practice I saw today from a quarterback perspective was very high energy and very fast moving. And I think it's because you are trying to get 3 guys involved in drills, in reps. And so you're going through them fast. Like one guy takes a rep, boom. One guy takes a rep, boom. One guy takes a rep, boom. And you're kind of like rotating in and out. And I don't know, like that's not what I would typically feel like you'd see in a regular season practice. And I think that is a sign that they're still very much working on the development of these 2 young guys.
Right. It's like we've talked about how close the battle has been and I guess continues to be. And like maybe there's a way, like you said, we'll speed up the tempo and try to split up the reps as evenly as possible between those two for the backup role.
Yeah, and again, I don't even think it's really about the backup role, and we'll find out on Sunday who the backup is. Right,
right. The official number 2.
Right, they're going to have to declare somebody, and I would be surprised if the depth chart that comes out doesn't have an or in it. But we'll go from there. They will have to declare. I mean, I can't imagine they'll have both guys active, so I imagine they'll have to declare, okay, this is the emergency third string guy. So whoever that is, we'll talk about it. But again, I think this is more when you're talking about development. You're not talking about developing to be a backup. You're talking about development to be a potential starter in the NFL.
Right.
And that's what when you're talking about competition, that's what we're really looking at is like down the line, what's the development of both of these guys? So that if we go into the offseason next year and you feel like there is an actual starting quarterback competition, where are you in it? At what point do you make that determination? And it's not going to be, well, we named this guy QB2 last year, so he's the guy. Because I think that's what a lot of people think. If Spencer is named the quarterback, the QB2, that will somehow benefit him in that long-term discussion.
You could look at it. Maybe he's got the slightest little lead for it next year, but yeah, it's going to come down to competition in camp again.
Yeah, and we'll see. DA even wouldn't rule out that they rotate the backup job throughout the course of the year.
I could see that too, right?
That would be so annoying. But yeah, I really and genuinely, I think it's that they just like both of these quarterbacks. Like that's really what this is about. Is they feel like they have two potential quality starting quarterbacks in the NFL,
right? And
they're trying to develop them, right? They're not going to just bail on one because they have the other, and that's where you are. So we'll see. We'll see if the meter of those reps changes at all as we go. But again, it's tough because we don't get to watch the full practice. That's about it. John Ridgway is here now. He's wearing number 95.
I think that's a solid, good, nice depth piece pickup.
Yeah, no, I think when you look at what you're talking about from
he's supposedly like a hulking dude too, massive.
Dude. He's a big dude. He's a people mover. Another 6'5" guy. You have these two 6'5" defensive tackles, which typically defensive tackles are like, Colin Saunders build, right? Like lower to the ground, kind of built like a bowling ball. So the Saints have ended up with these two hulking, tall, long-legged defensive tackles. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, anytime you're trying to just add a depth piece and you find someone who's, I don't know, got 32 games of NFL experience and you're basically getting him for nothing, you can't complain about that. So he also went to the same college as Joe Woods.
Okay. Little connection.
Yeah, that's all I got.
So there you go. Right.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about before we move on?
No, I think it'll be interesting, obviously, Wednesday to find out more about, Willie Gay, because, I think he was one of those reasons we were confident in this linebacker group, obviously, going into the year. So it sucked to see him sideline week 1.
He's definitely a piece that I want to see on the field.
Yeah.
And it's not, and I don't know when he got hurt, but they've been off for 3 days. So, when did that injury actually develop? We'll see, but
flipping steaks on the barbecue, I guess.
Hopefully it's just something minor. And Wednesday he won't even appear on the injury report at all, and DA will be like, "Psych."
Got fouled too hard at the home basketball game.
Yeah, that's got to be it. But all right, let's wrap this segment up. We're gonna come back. We're gonna talk about X factors, potential pitfalls that are looming in this season that kind of have to go one way for me to feel confident about it. All right. And then we're going to close out with what the Saints team has to do to kind of change the tune, change the narrative around it. We'll get into all that. Who dat? This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. We will be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. This segment, we are going to talk about Alvin Kamara's real estate license. No, that's not what we're here for. I'm sorry. I can't help myself. We already talked about Alvin Kamara's real estate entrepreneurship. That's what it sounds like it is. But we're going to talk about X factors, potential pitfalls, right? And so we're going to hit some on offense, some on defense. To me, the biggest X factor for the Saints this year, and it's the part of the conversation that gets ignored way too often when you hear from basically any national media pundit about the Saints. All they want to talk about is the offense. All they want to talk about is the offense. But to me, if this team is going to be able to turn things around and get back to the postseason, it's going to be about the defense. It's going to be about, can the rush and coverage be elite? Because I don't think you can have one or the other. I think you need both. Because you can have great pass rush, but if someone's running wide open, that's where the ball is going to go, right? You can have great coverage, but if the pass rush never gets there, eventually someone's going to get open. It's just a matter of time. But what we've seen throughout camp is elite rush and coverage. Can you stay healthy? Can you get all these guys on the field? Can Marshawn Lattimore and Paulson Adebo be out there for the entire season? Can Chase Young, Cam Jordan, Carl Granderson all be out there and all impact the pass rush, right? I was reading I think it was ESPN. They did a ranking of how every team can win the Super Bowl, right? And the Saints are 28th. And it's just going by odds. It's not really him making an opinion on, okay, this team has a better chance than this team. It's plus 2,800 or whatever the betting odds were. But the write-up never mentions the defense at all. It's oh, maybe Derek Carr can be a lot better than we all think he is. And again, sure, I get it. I get that the quarterback is obviously very important, and Derek Carr needs to perform at a higher level than a lot of people think he's capable of doing. But it's a lot easier to do that when your defense is putting you in good situations. I watched Rex fucking Grossman go to a Super Bowl. It's not all about the offense if you have an elite defense. And to me, that's the X factor, is if this Saints defense can make opposing passing games miserable while also limiting the run, which I think they're pretty good at. They should be decent at it. I don't think they're going to be.
They weren't last year.
They were in the middle of the pack. They weren't the worst. They were right there around the middle, and I think you should improve in that part of the game too.
Run defense is definitely big for me.
And so but again, to me, that's the biggest X factor for the season. It's say what you want about Derek Carr. We kind of know what to expect from him, right? He's not going to throw a ton of interceptions. He's not going to take a ton of terrible sacks, and he didn't. Last year, he had to sack 31 times. That was middle of the road in the NFL when you consider he was sacked 12 times in the first 3 weeks of the season before the offensive line kind of got their shit together a little bit. That's a sack a game? Not even you're talking about 19 more sacks the rest of the season from week 3 on. So you're not talking about a guy who's constantly taking terrible sacks. Now, there are moments where he does hold the ball too long, and obviously that's a factor, but he only got sacked 31 times throughout a season. You weren't doing that all the time. So I do think whether he can get to a high enough level that you feel oh, he's going to carry this offense, you do know what the baseline is, right? Even last year, everyone hated everything about it. He only threw 8 interceptions. He's not a guy who turns the ball over. He can get it downfield. He can throw a good deep ball. Can he get it? Can he put the ball on target with guys to get yak? I don't know. But again, if the defense is constantly putting you in plus situations, you're going to have a much easier time as a quarterback. So to me, that's always going to be my biggest X factor is, can this defense be not just good? Can they be elite? Can they be top 5? Because if they can be, then yeah, I have a lot of faith that this team can get back to the playoffs, because life is a lot easier with a top 5 defense.
What's mind-boggling to me, too, you can go over all the stats you want from last season, too. This team was the top 10 in both scoring defense, scoring offense.
Yeah.
And that, to me, blows my mind when you look at how they finished, obviously.
Yeah, the Patriots game really skews a lot of that. When you have a plus, what was it, plus 35? What was the score of that game? There's 35-0.
And then, yeah, they obviously got hot at the end of the year, too. And I know they played shitty quarterbacks. Everybody wants to throw that in as well. And a lot of Derek Carr, they want to, knock him by saying a lot of his numbers came in garbage, quote unquote, garbage time.
Yeah, and I understand that. I don't know. Like we went through this last year. You could say the Vikings game, but again, that wasn't really Derek because he was out at halftime. That was Jameis who brought the touchdowns in garbage time. The Lions game, which again, you could say it's if the justification is okay, they didn't win the game, so all the points were in garbage time, then sure, but they had a chance to go win that game. So I don't know. It's tough. And you're talking about games where you didn't play well in the first half, you played well in the second half. And I think that's more what the conversation is. It's like, okay, you didn't start the game well and you dug yourself a hole that you were unable to dig out of. Thus, these stats didn't matter because you didn't put them up at a point in the game where you should have kept us close. And instead we were in a hole. Right. And you could say that against Jacksonville. You could say that against Houston. You can say that against Detroit. You can say that against Minnesota, even though we went out at halftime. So there are games where you could point to and say, like, yeah, okay, if you played better in the beginning of the game, then we would be in better shape. But you can also point to the defense. We were talking all last year about slow starts on the defense, right?
Oh, man.
Like,
I remember you had that conversation with Tyrann Mathieu, and it was like, well, maybe you guys should yell at each other with that halftime speech before coming out in the first quarter.
Yeah. So again, I have much higher expectations for this defense than this offense probably. And that's why I look at it and say, like, that's the side of the ball that I'm going to be more critical of when we're kind of looking at it at the end of the day. But I do need to see Derek be more efficient. And that's kind of my second pitfall. Like, I want to see him get back to like what he was doing at the end of last year, which is completing 70% of your passes and getting the ball out of your hand quickly. Right? Like, I think if you can be efficient from the pocket, if you can be kind of a lot more like late career Tom Brady, then, and I'm not saying Derek needs to be Tom Brady. I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but I think if you watch how Tom Brady survived the last few years of his career, and surviving also won a Super Bowl during that period, it was, pre-snap recognition. You know where you're going to go with the ball before you even snap it based on what you're seeing. And and you can obviously change that. You can react, but like, those are the split-second decisions where you're getting the ball out. And, Tom Brady never got sacked, really. Like, unless you were talking about late in a game where he was trying to make a comeback, like Tom, he understood that I can't move around. I can't stand back here. I need to get the ball out and have my athletic players do athletic things. And, sometimes that can be frustrating, but it does eliminate a lot of the variables of bad things that can happen to a quarterback when you're not getting hit. And I really would like to see Derek be a lot more like that, right? I want to see quick decisions. I want to get the ball out in space to athletic players and let them operate. Now, he's going to end up getting called the check down king or whatever. Like, that's what's going to end up happening if he plays a lot more like that. But I think this offense will be a lot better if you see a more decisive, quick decision-making Derek Carr. And it will take a lot of the offensive line out of the equation. But I think that's to me, that is the approach, is a lot of quick game, a lot of getting the ball out to the edges of the field. And like, I think eventually that'll start to resonate, but we'll see.
No, that's a big question too. Obviously, we've seen a very vanilla, quote unquote, showing so far of Clint Kubiak's scheme and what this offense really is going to look like, and very limited action still of Carr, obviously, in the preseason. So I see the weapons around, obviously, for them to be a better than average offense. It's all about, can obviously this offensive line hold up in pass protection and open up the lanes in the run game.
Yeah, and so that kind of leads into, so one of my X factors is, these are all questions, right? Can Derek Carr be more efficient? Yeah. Can you protect the protection? That's sort of my X factors. Because here's the thing. We know this team is not going to be able to do a bunch of, 5-step drop, max protect plays and take shots down the field constantly. Like, we know that. If you're going into this season thinking we're going to be putting this offensive line in straight up pass pro sets 10 to 15 times a game and expect to have success, you're going to have a rough time. You're not going to enjoy yourself. But can you protect the protection? And by that, I mean, can you run the ball, right? Can you get positive yards on first and second down so you're not sitting back in 3rd and 8 where the defense can just tee off on you, right? Also, can you execute play action and get the defense to at least honor the play action? And one of the ways that you're going to do that is by running the ball with Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed on the field. You have to be able to do that, because if you can't, if you can only run the ball with your bigger wide receivers, if you have to put Cedric Wilson and Bub Means or whoever out there to block, and you tip your hand that it's going to be a run, then you can't just run play action out of that same look. The goal of this Clint Kubiak offense is to make everything look the same. And in order to make everything look the same, you have to be able to run out of 11 personnel with Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed on the field, or out of 12 personnel with Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed on the field. And that's going to require those guys to block. And we've talked to them a lot about, hey, this is something I'm working on. I've bulked up a little bit. I asked Rashid Shaheed in the locker room, like, hey, how much of blocking in that sense is just wanting to do it? And he said, that's all it is. Like, it's, obviously there's a physical ability that goes into it, but there are very few wide receivers in the NFL who you should look at and say, well, he's going to have an advantage blocking this linebacker right now. Right. Like, DBs, you might be able to win, but like a lot of the time it's just get in the way. Maybe
just like DK Metcalf, that jumped to mind right away.
Yeah, DK Metcalf. Mike Thomas was a good blocking wide receiver. You have these big bodied. AJ Brown is a good blocking wide receiver. But, you think Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are elite blockers? No. But you have to be willing to do it. You have to at least be a traffic cone.
Yes.
And kind of wall off, right? Now, you can't hold. That drives me insane when I see wide receivers holding on blocks. Like, you aren't blocking them well anyway. Just slow them down. Don't grab. And that's going to be a big thing. And if you can do that and you can block on the edges a little bit more effectively with those wide receivers, and you can run the ball, and then you can get into your play action, and the defense isn't able to just say, well, Rashid's out here, they're not going to run the ball. Chris is out here, they're not going to run the ball. Then you have a chance. If you're going to throw Trevor Penning back there and let the defensive line tee off on him, then it's not even about Trevor. Because you need to you have to understand what you're dealing with. And I actually think if you do this thing the right way, Trevor can be an asset in the run game, because if there's one thing he does well, it's get downfield and attack people. And if I can get more into that and get the defensive line thinking about that, then this offense can have success. If I can't, then this offense is gonna flail. And we are going to be talking about, okay, can the defense carry them? Not just like compliment them. Can they carry them? And I don't know. But to me, that's like the biggest thing that this offense needs to do is protect the protection.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess too, when you mentioned X factors, to me, just immediately, just a player jumped into my head, and that was Alvin Kamara. And that goes hand in hand, though, with the offensive line and being able to, protect the protection there too. It's like he's clearly the most gifted, the most talented athlete, I think, on this offense. And I don't even think it's close, honestly. Even at 29 years old, I'll take AK. We need him to be that superstar, though. The Saints need him to be that superstar for this offense to thrive.
Yeah, it's tough because, like, to a certain extent, I was having this conversation about Saquon Barkley the other day, which is like, one of the things that makes him special is you don't even have to block for him. He can make 3 guys miss and then run for 40 yards. But like, that's evidence that you don't have a successful run game. Like, it's nice to have that X factor back.
Yeah.
But
he has to at least have a second or two to be able to make those amazing moves too.
He needs to have enough athleticism and burst to get to the hole he sees, right? Like, if you can create a lane, what I need the running back to be able to do is get there, is to see it and get to it.
Sure.
And when you see running backs start to fall off a cliff, it's usually that. It's not that they can't find the hole. It's that they can't get there in time and they can't get through it, right? And I think Alvin can still do that. and we see, Matt Ray will talk about the acceleration stats, and his acceleration stats are still excellent. And that's really what you're looking at with a running back. It's short area quickness, right? I don't need him to run a 40, but I need him to get from this side of the, like the B gap to the other B gap, right? So you'll go from there. But no, I agree. If you can have a run game, then this offense is going to feel like a lot more effective. And because I think this defense is going to constantly be putting you in positive down and distance situations, positive field position situations. And you have to be able to take advantage of those. And that kind of feeds into one more. And is it, can Blake Grupe be rock solid? Can he be elite? And again, we're talking about the difference between like, okay, you're going to make a lot of your kicks versus you're making all your kicks. I need you to be in the 90%, not the 80s. I want you in the 90s, especially from 40 to 50. I don't want to see any misses from 40 to 50. If you miss a 58-yarder, I can live with it. If you're missing even from a little outside 50, I can live with it because I put you in that situation. The reason he's your kicker this year is because you trust that he can make 95% of his kicks inside of 50.
Yeah, I mean, how many did he miss last year? Inside the 50. I'm sorry if you don't know offhand.
From 40 to 50?
No, like inside the 50.
Well, he went 6 of 9 from 50 plus.
Okay.
He was 8 of 10 from 40 to 49, 6 of 6 from 30 to 39, 10 of 12 from 20 to 29. Those were those
that hurts.
Yeah, those are those kind of weird ones. So inside 50, he was, let's see, 28, 34 of 38. He missed 4 kicks.
If it wasn't for those damn 30 and in, there really wasn't a bad rookie season.
No, that's what I agree. Like, and 6 of 9 from 50 plus, like that's a good number. You're not going to get mad about that. Like,
right.
That's the number that you would expect. You're talking about 70%, 75% in that range. Now, yeah, right. If instead of 4 misses, you're talking 2 misses, which I've said pretty, consistently, like when you're missing inside 30, it's almost never like, well, the kicker just didn't kick it straight. There's almost always something else that happened. Right. Like maybe you grounded the club or, like the ball didn't get where it was supposed to get. And I do think holding was an issue last year with Lou at certain points. And you never talk about holding because we don't really see it, unless they're showing it on the broadcast. Even in like the All-22, you can't really see the hold very well. So you just kind of assume that they're all good. But sometimes the holds get messed up. Sometimes the ball doesn't get down in time. Sometimes it's not facing the direction you want it to face. So we'll see. But no, like I think this season, they really need a lot of, you talk about like in golf, you talk about strokes gained putting, right? Like, so you drive for dough, or drive for show, putt for dough kind of deal. Like I can put the ball, at the 3 yards from the pin, and you could put the ball 30 yards from the pin. If we both make that putt, we end up with the same score.
Right.
Right. So like, it'd be nice if every drive could end in the end zone. Sometimes you just got to go make a kick. And I think this is going to be an offense that needs to be able to score in 3s. Now, obviously it'd be great if you could score in 7s, but I think you're going to be kicking a lot of field goals this year. So I need Blake Grupe to be not just good. I need him to be elite. Right. And that's the problem when you look at like, okay, how can this Saints season end well? You need a lot of elite things to happen around the sketchier parts of the equation. And that's always a tough ask.
Yeah, I think obviously, thank goodness, most of the games are inside, obviously home field advantage, and then the rest of your opponents. But there's obviously those outdoor games where the extra factors around you just end up becoming something that he's not used to dealing with and could be an issue.
Right. You have Green Bay and New York in December. Obviously,
right.
You got a game in Tampa. You got a game in Carolina. But even by those standards, like you're talking about a lot of indoor kicking.
Yeah.
And those were the misses that actually bothered me more. Like the miss in Green Bay, while it sucked, obviously, you could at least look at it and be like, okay, this is his first ever outdoor kick in a big moment. You know, like it was 48 yards. It wasn't like it was a chip shot. The ones that bothered me were like the 52-yarders indoors. Like he missed a kick against Houston.
Right,
he missed a kick against Jacksonville. Like, you can't miss indoor kicks. You know, like there's no excuse. Like if there's no wind, just kick it straight. And that's what Blake does really well. Like I think we've talked about this. Like one of the things that you look at Charlie's kicks, and he kind of plays this like natural draw, like this high draw, which I think works a little better from distance than someone who might kick just like an arrow straight shot like Blake does. But that should, in theory, make you a much better indoor kicker, because you're not dealing with the wind. And when you're kind of powering it through the wind, it's not affecting it as much as when you're trying to just kick it straight and it just kind of gets held out. You know, I don't know. I played golf on Saturday, so I'm feeling.
Oh yeah, I was thinking about you because the weather wasn't as bad.
It didn't rain at all.
Right, we weren't as bad as the forecast was on the app that we were looking at on Friday.
No, I'm glad I went because it did not drop, or there was not a drop of rain the entire time I was out there. I did lose like 10 balls, so I definitely didn't go great. But
I had some nice shots. Saturday night, like overnight, we got rain. That was about it.
I hit the green on a 193-yard par 3.
Right.
So that was a little 5-iron.
Yeah. Good day out there overall.
Yeah. All right, one more X factor for me, and then we can move on. Right, trying to change the subject. And it's, can Chris Olave be a true number one? And I've seen a lot of people say he's not a number one. The Saints have 3 number 2 receivers, and maybe you're right. But that's an X factor to me. Is, can Chris be that elite guy? Can he be that top end NFL receiver that we've seen in flashes, right?
Yeah.
Can we get like those like a 200-yard game, like those type of I'm taking over right now type of games that it feels like you've been on the cusp of a couple times, but you've just never got into, whether it be like that Atlanta game where he got hurt coming out of halftime, where it felt like he was ready to explode. Like there's games where he's had really big first quarters and then disappeared. Can we just get a more consistent, dominating type player to the point that other teams have no choice but to double him, but to bracket him? And because if they're going to do that, then it's going to open up everything else. So we'll see. But the worst case scenario for Chris is other teams feel like, okay, we can single cover him and be completely fine. And I don't know.
I'm pretty excited about this duo going into this year of, Olave with Shaheed. I don't know. I still do believe Chris can be a quote unquote number 1 wide receiver, whatever is your true definition of that. I don't know if you're just looking for that dynamic playmaker you can rely upon, or is there something else specifically attached to it? Because I think he is that elite pass catcher. Obviously, we've talked about the need to get a little bit more physical, but I think just early on already, we've seen some amazing catches from this guy.
Yeah, his hands are definitely elite.
Yeah, for sure.
And like the kind of like attention, or no, it's not like concentration with the ball in the air to make some of these spectacular catches. Like you saw 4 different catches last year that you could watch an entire career highlight reel and not see a lot of really good receivers make those types of catches. Like there was the one against Carolina where he was diving and going to the ground. There was the one against Atlanta where he kind of like juggled it and caught it up here. There was one against Minnesota where he got it in the back of the end zone from Jameis, right? Like I think there was another one in that Carolina game that was like a pretty incredible catch. Or maybe it was Green Bay. There was one, I think there might have been one in Green Bay that was like, did he just do that?
Yeah, exactly. He's had those moments already. So I think, yeah, he can be that dude.
Well, we'll see. I need it to be more consistent.
Right.
I need it to it can't just be those flashy plays. Sometimes I just need like a nice, subtle catch and run.
Right. Not something where you're like, what are you thinking there on that drop?
Yeah. And there weren't that many drops. There was, the good example is like, there's that like 3 or 4 game stretch last season where everything seemed to just not work. And the kind of low point was when He was wearing the shiesty. It was in Indy, and he ran a perfect double move, got wide open, and then Derek threw a ball, and it's like, we can get mad at Derek all we want. When the ball hits the receiver on the face mask,
Right.
it's not on the quarterback. And that was a low point, I think. And he came back from that, and he played better. And so hopefully you kind of erase that part of it, right? Where you don't have those lulls, and you kind of just have this baseline of kind of consistent to elite. And like, you can waver a little bit, but I need it to be at that baseline or higher all the time.
I'm also a little bit biased because I did draft Chris in my big money league to be my receiver as well. So.
I was trying to get Chris. I was trying to get him, but he went too early. He went like the third round. I was like, wow.
Okay. Yeah, I think I got him in the third.
Yeah, I ended up my league. I drafted one league, and I think I have another one coming up. I need to check, but my receivers are like Zay Flowers and Nico Collins. It's not good.
You might have to make a trade.
But I went Bijan and Jonathan Taylor, number 1 and number 2.
Can't argue with that.
It's a 2 QB league, so I went with
Burrow.
Yes, I sent this to you. I did.
Yeah, and I forget who your backup was though.
Burrow and I ended up with Burrow, Jaden Daniels, and Jared Goff.
Oh yeah, Jaden Daniels. Yeah.
Yeah,
and
so it's
Goff.
a decent team. It's just the wide receivers, man, are
no, that's a great trio when you got to play. Obviously, the waiver wire, I'm sure right now sucks for any kind of quarterback if you got to play 2.
Yeah, at a certain point, I'll try to trade one of the quarterbacks and get me a wide receiver 1.
Right. It's like
change
who
change
can you
the narrative.
That'll fetch you something. Who can you afford to trade that'll fetch you what you want?
Right. Change the narrative around my team a little bit, which hey, wouldn't you know, that's what we're going to be talking about to close out the show is how can the Saints change the narrative around them, which feels negative. Like I'm one of the more positive people in general when it comes to talking about the Saints. And even I feel like, man, this is a bummer. Like, I feel like everyone's already bummed out, but we haven't even started the games yet. It feels like we're talking about a team that's 0-4.
Yeah, I didn't get that all this offseason either. There's just too much angst, negativity, what you want to call it. It's like, for crying out loud, we're heading into a new year. And obviously, yeah, I think everybody's been down on the fact that there haven't been a playoff appearances the past couple of years. Well, guess what? There's a lot of franchises that are worse than that. And I know that nobody wants to hear that bullshit, but I think the Saints have built in the right direction with Dennis Allen. Hopefully, yes, they can get back there this year.
I don't care. I want to know how they can change it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to be talking about when we come back. This is Inside Black and Gold. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. The Saints have gone go-karting. You know what that means? Super Bowl, baby.
Team bonding.
Team bonding.
See, you didn't need California. You could just do go-karts here. There's bonding.
Yeah, I figured they'd go-karting in California. No, they came back and went go-karting. I guess. No, I mean, that is a big part of why you go out to California, stuff like that, like team bonding, like team chemistry is really is a thing. And I don't think last year's team had much quality chemistry at all when it came down to it, at least not in the middle of the season.
And I think you saw that. Obviously, there was little tiffs with a lot of folks, and that kind of spilt over on the field.
Oh, you definitely saw it.
Yeah,
it was not subtle, especially as the season kind of came to a close. But you know, and the thing is, like, we can be huge fans of Michael Thomas all we want. We also have to admit he was not doing that locker room any favors, and I don't think it's a coincidence that everything seemed to be a little bit more tightly knit later in the year, but. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about how the Saints can change kind of the narrative around this team, which is like everything is bad all the time. Every time the coach speaks, he's making a mistake. He's doing something stupid. You know, the quarterback is never going to do anything of any consequence whatsoever. You might as well just phone in the season now. And that's a bummer. Like, again, I talked about this before we came in here. The reaction to everything feels like we're talking about a team that's 0-4 and should basically just phone in the rest of the season and get ready for a number 1 pick. And like,
And at this point, too,
guys,
to go along with all that, you'd think they'd even have their number one pick that people are so mad too.
I don't know. But guys, I do need you. This is a fact. They haven't played a game yet. So we should still be at this point talking about how things can go well. And that's why before I came on here, I wanted to talk about, okay, how can things go well? How can they go badly? And, you know, one of the things that this team, this offense in particular, I think has going for it this year is I do feel like everyone's on the same page. Everyone is pulling the rope in the same direction. Now that could change. It seemed like that was the case this time last year, but I don't know. Like year two with a lot of the same people, with a new offensive coordinator, with everyone kind of on the same level of that offense in terms of we all started learning it this year. No one's ahead, no one's behind. There's not going to be any debates over how this should happen and how this should happen. It's all kind of come back to Clint, who's going to tell you how it should happen. And I think that's healthy, right? And I think this offense is a little closer. And I don't know, hopefully that manifests into something. But, you know, I kind of said this early on. I don't know if 10 wins is going to get it done. Like, I don't know if a 10-win season where you got a wild card bid and go to the playoffs and lose in the first round to like the 49ers or whoever.
Oh, for the fan base.
Oh yeah, for the fan base. Yeah, I mean the team is where the team is, and I think the team is a lot more optimistic than most people probably give them credit for. Like this idea that they're just like waiting to have this season collapse on them and in agony. And I need you to understand that's not where the team is. The team feels like they have a quality group, and I think they have a quality group. And you kind of just get bogged down in all the negativity that's kind of being heaped on them from people who aren't necessarily even in full understanding of like what the situation is or what they're looking at. They're just everyone. It's this echo chamber of everyone kind of feeding off of each other's noise. And they're like, well, he said that. Well, I heard Colin Cowherd say this, so that must mean that. And it's like, what the fuck does Colin know? But at the end of the day, the question is, what does this team have to do to get the fans back, right? To get the people who are walking into the Superdome looking for every opportunity to boo, because I know they're there. How do you get those folks back? What do you have to do? Because again, I don't think 10 wins where you go to the postseason on wild card and lose is going to get it done.
At this point, it might sound crazy. I think the only thing is you got to bench Carr and put Rattler in, and then people will be all overjoyed.
There's definitely some people who that's the only solution.
That's the solution, right?
And it's not just that. You also got to fire DA when you do it.
Oh, for sure.
And that's the thing. Like, you're not getting Twitter back. Once you lose Twitter, there's no regaining that crowd. You're done. This team could go win a Super Bowl, and I'm pretty sure Saints Twitter would be like, yeah, but they sucked. Like,
you still got to get rid of DA and Carr, right?
That's probably not true. I think that's the only way you get Saints Twitter back is by winning a Super Bowl. And even then, you would still have some holdouts.
Defense carried them, Jeff. They need to get rid of everybody.
You would have some holdouts for sure.
Yeah.
It would either be fire DA or keep DA and fire Derek, because they would anyway. But like, so a Super Bowl probably. If you just got to the NFC Championship,
yeah.
I don't think that you would win them over. I don't think you would get Twitter. So the way I look at it more so is like, I'm not going to bother trying to figure out how I can win back the toxic wasteland that is Saints Twitter. It's a nuclear winter, and you will not be able to go back in there for decades and decades. It is uninhabitable for anyone who just wants to have a good time. But how can you win over the fans in the building? And by that, I mean, like, how can you get to a point where people aren't sitting in the stands just waiting to boo and just waiting for the first opportunity something goes badly to tell you how much they're angry about the situation? And to me, I think you probably have to go win the division and host a playoff game. I think that's probably the only way.
You definitely have to win a division. Yeah, there's no ifs, ands, or buts there. Everybody's still complaining about how shitty it is in the NFC South. That you got to be the best of the shitty.
Well, because if you go and you win 10 games, but the Falcons win the division, you'll still hear shit about that, right?
Exactly.
Like, especially with Justin Simmons and that whole situation. And
right,
I think you have to go win the division. And I think it's also like, how do you have to start this season to get it so you can get halfway through and not be walking on eggshells. Because it's a tough scenario. Like, I don't like saying, well, you have a must-win game in week 1.
It has to be.
If there ever has been a must-win week 1 game, this is it. Like, can you imagine the noise that you will hear if the Panthers walk into your house and embarrass you on week 1 of a season where all we talked about is this new offense and all these revamped things? Like, that cannot happen. So that's the first thing. You have to start 1-0, because I think if you lose that opener, you're not getting anybody back. This is not going to be 2017 where you start 0-2 and you get beaten up by the Patriots and the Bucks in back-to-back weeks, and then suddenly you turn things around. No one's going to be going to the games in week 3 and 4.
Well, they might. You're right. They'll go away, and then they're just biding their time, waiting for Spencer Rattler. But the cesspool that if there ends up being a loss week 1, we're going to be miserable for the podcast, or it's going to be miserable on Sports Talk. I know that it's going to be no coming back for sure with Saints fans, and I get the madness that is the Who Dat Nation. They have this high standard now of what was left behind with Sean Payton and Drew Brees, and it's just it isn't that anymore. But it can be something else. It can still be a playoff contender, but I just don't see Super Bowl right now, obviously, for this team.
No. And I'm still in week 2, right?
But no, that starts with in order to be that at least playoff contender, you can't come out week 1 and lose to the team that won 2 games last year.
No, you cannot.
At home.
And I also think, like, you can't start 1-3. You definitely can't start 0-4. So, like, where do you have to be? I think you have to win week 1.
4-2, I think you got to go early on.
Yeah, I don't know about 4-2, but so you have to win week 1.
Yeah.
And I need you to win one of the next 2 games. I don't need you to win both. I don't need you to beat the Cowboys and the Eagles, but I do need you to beat the Cowboys or the Eagles.
I'll go with you there, sure.
I need you to go to Atlanta at 2-1. So the worst case scenario is you walk out of Atlanta at 2-2, and then you go to Kansas City with a 500 record and you see what happens. But if you can get to Kansas City at 3-1, you're kind of playing with house money. Like, I don't think anyone is gonna look at that Monday Night Football game in Kansas City and be like, "Oh man, DA couldn't get this done. Fire him right now." But if you can walk out of there at no worse than 2-3, you can survive that, because the schedule does get much lighter. And then you have the Broncos, who, everyone's going to be like, Sean Payton's going to come in here and boat race the Saints.
Relax.
I'm sorry. Bo Nix is not going to have a good season. Like, I'm not worried about Bo Nix. Bo Nix might be an absolutely fine starting quarterback in the NFL. He's not a guy I'm worried about in his rookie season.
Exactly. I'm with you there. It's like, I'm more worried about, playing Atlanta, playing at Tampa, obviously, because that's a division right there.
Yeah.
And, those tiebreakers are going to be obviously crucial down the stretch. I still think it's going to be a mishy-mashy mess at the end, but still be close, and the Saints expect them to be in the mix.
I think Tampa's going to be bad. I think this is going to be the season they should have had last year.
Oh, man, I hope you're right. I don't want to see – I can't stand Baker Mayfield. I'm not a fan.
I just don't see Todd Bowles as a good coach. I don't look at a guy who went 8-9 with Tom Brady and say, like, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt here. How come he gets the benefit of the doubt and DA doesn't? They have the exact same career.
Tampa fans aren't as petty as Saints fans.
I guess not. But there's this like I think like one of the reasons that team stayed afloat last year was Dave Canales, who I think is a good coach.
Yeah.
He's gone.
Against the week 1 opponent.
Yeah. And we'll see. I'm hopeful that he can turn Bryce around. I like Bryce Young as a quarterback. I don't think he should have been the number 1 pick, but I don't think he's hopeless. And I'm just hopeful that he doesn't turn him around before week 2.
They've invested big time money in that offensive line in the middle And so I'm hoping that the pass rush we're hoping to see from the Saints is prevalent there, because I think Bryce was sacked like second most in the NFL last year. So he should be a little shell shocked still week one.
I agree. But yeah, I need to see the Saints win week one. I need to see them come out of Kansas City no worse than 2-3. And if you can do that, you give yourself a chance. If you're looking at 1-5 or 1-4 or 0-5, then I do think you're firing a coach. But we'll have to see. But either way, again, 10 wins. I think that all that does is guarantee that we have another year of this. I think you need 11, 12. You need a playoff, hopefully a playoff win.
So even like 10 wins, obviously, and what if you do make the playoffs but not win the division? Or if you do win the division, it's still like, 10 wins?
I mean, I think the team will look at that and say...
No, I'm talking about, just the fans were just going off of here.
Yeah, no, I mean, the team will look at that and say, we've increased our win total each of the last 3 seasons.
Right.
We went from 7-10 out of the playoffs to 9-8 just missing the playoffs to 10-7 in the playoffs.
Yes.
Right? Like, I looked at this last year and I was like, what coach has been fired after year 2 by improving their record year over year and finishing year 2 with a winning record, then got fired? I don't think there's an example in NFL history of that happening. Now, I would double down and say, I don't think there's an example of a coach increasing their win total 3 years in a row, making the playoffs, and then getting fired either. So I think it would just be like, we're still mediocre. We're still stuck in the middle. Move on. And then you would end up in this kind of maelstrom of, what do we do with Derek? Because this year you can make the justification that a rookie quarterback is not someone I'm going to throw in. And I fully on board with that idea. Now, year 2, you're going to have to justify to me why we are better off with the veteran quarterback. Why this is not we went with the Alex Smith season, now give me Timo Mahomes.
Right.
Now, obviously not a first-round pick. It's a different conversation. But if you are high on a quarterback, you're high on a quarterback. And you only get so many seasons. So that's what would become very, very uncomfortable very fast for Dennis, because you can say a lot of things about Dennis. One of the things that is 100% accurate is he's a Derek Carr guy.
Oh, yeah. He's made that clear twice now.
Oh, he's made it very clear. He's a Derek Carr guy. And I mean, like, I think Derek Carr gets a bad rap. I don't think he's as bad as people make it out to be. But you're not going to argue to me that, like, that would not be the same situation that the Chiefs found themselves in, where they were like, we have Alex Smith. He's fine.
No, but like,
but we feel like we could upgrade.
First round pick. That is a huge difference. But I know that Spencer Rattler's the second coming of Mahomes. So what am I talking about?
It isn't. It isn't. Like, it depends on what is your evaluation of this quarterback.
Yeah.
Do you think that he can be an upgrade over the guy you have in there? Because if you do, then in year 2, you have to at least let this play out, and you have to make it a competition. Whereas this year, I don't think that I think that you were correct in
He's
not
really not ready,
forcing that scenario in any way. And we'll see how this goes, right? But that would be the ultimate awkwardness of next year. Of like, we've seen this 10-win debacle, and I don't see it getting better than this.
Right.
So where do we go from here?
It's still that feeling of mediocrity that you know, and we're not on that elite level. And oh man, I just don't. What's tough is, Jeff, even if things go completely right, it's still hard to find 11 wins like of that kind of season.
Right. And so that goes back to my question. Can the narrative around this team change? And I don't think it can. I think that it's going to be this way the whole way, because I just think they're going to struggle. Like, I think they're going to be a solid team at points, And I think they're going to have really frustrating dips in production. And you're going to have a 2 or 3 game losing streak at some point. You're going to win a couple games in a row. You're going to be hovering around 500. Right. And we're going to be right back here at the end. I just can't shake that feeling. I would love to be optimistic. I just can't shake that feeling that we're going to be right back here. And so to answer my own question, no, I don't think that they can change this narrative. I think that it is what it is. And I'd love to see them win 12, 13 games and go to the NFC Championship or something crazy. Because I think that's what it would take. I really do. I think you would need that 06 season like Sean had to give people like a reason for optimism.
Yeah, I got you.
And because that team wasn't ready to go to the NFC Championship that year. They did, but they weren't ready.
Stumbled into it, right?
Like they got boat raced by, what was it, Chicago?
Yeah.
And like that's what would happen this year, right? If the Saints somehow found their way into the NFC Championship. But I think you would need, maybe not the NFC Championship, you would need to get to the divisional round.
Hey, maybe this is the year they get a bunch of luck injuries, and while other teams don't. I don't know, because that's another way I think that they could end up having that 11 win season. It's like all of a sudden the people around you are just crumbling.
Oh, 100%. Luck is a very underrated ability.
For sure, right.
And the best teams every year tend to be the lucky teams. Like you didn't lose your quarterback, you didn't lose your starting running back, you didn't use your starting wide receivers. You know, like look at the Browns last year. Like the Browns were the most unlucky team on the planet, and they still found a way to the postseason. But it turned them from a team that might make noise to a team where you're like, yeah, they're gonna lose. Like Joe Flacco's a fun story and all,
right? But it's coming to an end eventually.
But all right. So on that super positive note, let's wrap up this podcast. We're gonna be coming back later in the week.
Woohoo!
Let's do it. We're going to come back later in the week. We're going to get more of a preview on the Panthers. Hopefully trying to get a Panthers reporter, podcast, or somebody in here to give us the lowdown on what all that looks like, because it's a much different roster, a much different coaching staff, a much different offense. Like it's going to look a lot different than the team we watched twice last year. So it'll be good to have something like that. We'll also have the first injury report coming out Wednesday, and we'll kind of get into an X Factors segment for that game specifically. And whatever else we want to talk about, let me know. Hit me up at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow Steve at Steve Geller, WWL. You can check out WWL.com for the latest news, notes, and analysis. It is game week.
I'm about to go pick you up. We're going to go take a tour of Alvin Kamara's house. We're potential buyers.
They won't let me in there. All right, y'all. Who dat? Go Saints.
Let's go black and gold.